Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the time has come that I might be buying an airplane. And the issue is that I live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the plane that I have found is in Bartow, Florida, which is about halfway between Orlando and Tampa. So, I've never seen this plane before, but I'm under contract and I've put money into escrow. So what I'm doing today is driving to Bartow, Florida from just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And as you can see, it's going to take quite a while to get there. It is currently 7:11 a.m. and my time of arrival is 4:20 p.m. So I'm just now getting on the road and I just wanted to kind of make a video to talk about it. So catch up with you in a little bit. Okay, so I suppose I need to fill you in with what's going on now that I'm in my hotel room in Winter Haven, Florida. So as you've probably noticed, I have not put a video up in a while, and the reason is because, quite frankly, every time I go to rent a plane, there's never one available. Now, the reason they're not available is because there's just more student pilots that are trying to get their hours and do training, or there's just a lot of planes that are in maintenance, inspections, and so forth. I've tried to combat this unavailability by flying with different flight clubs at different airports, but it just sort of seems that I can never find enough time to go fly when I want to fly. So the big question in general aviation then becomes, is it better to rent or to buy? I'm a big fan of Airplane Academy on YouTube, Charlie Gasmere, and he recommends the 3 F's when considering renting versus buying. And for me, it definitely comes down to the freedom, frequency, and finances as he suggests. Of course, finances are a major part of this. Nothing in aviation is cheap, and owning a plane is not cheap. However, cheap is a matter of perspective, and while it does cost a lot of money, I think that the enjoyment and the freedom and frequency also plays as big of a role, if not more of a role. So anyways, with that said, I'm getting tired of having to book a plane 2 weeks out only to find out that the weather's going to be bad on that day, and then I don't get to fly for another 2 weeks. Or the weather's nice, but then I'm constrained to only being able to fly, for example, from 2 to 4 p.m. on a random Saturday in March. And then even if 2 to 4 p.m. ends up working fine for my schedule, then I'm always feeling stressed that I need to hurry up and watch the clock to get back to turn the plane back in so that the next person renting the plane has availability during their time slot. All this is to say that I started looking at planes. And when I say I started looking, I mean I really looked. Every website online, every Facebook group, you name it, if it has planes for sale, I've probably looked. With that said, I probably looked at between 500 and 1,000 different planes. And when looking for planes, I kind of looked for what I wanted. And the reason I say that is I have to consider the cost of the plane to buy it, as well as the annual inspection costs, maintenance costs, upkeep costs, and fuel burn costs. Again, finances are a big thing. But I also wanted something that would carry a lot of weight, have some decent speed, and be a little bit bigger than the 172s or the Piper Cherokees that I have historically done all my flying time in. I originally started looking at the Bonanzas, the Moonies, even the retractable gear Cessnas, but what I quickly found is that anything with retractable gear, it seems that the annual inspection costs and the maintenance costs and the upkeep costs on those automatically goes up by a pretty significant amount. So that kind of narrowed my search to a fixed gear aircraft, and I wanted 4-seaters, again, that could carry a decent amount of weight and have a decent speed. So that brought me to pretty much the Piper Cherokee 160 or 180 at minimum, not the 140, and then the Cessna 172 and the 182, not the 152. After doing a little more research, I found that the Piper Cherokees are, I guess, historically a little bit cheaper to operate and maintain. However, they have some wing spar airworthiness directives, or ADs, that have to be complied with. It might not be a big deal, but I really just didn't want to mess with that. So that narrowed my search even more, and I landed on the 172 or the 182. Now I have the majority of my flight hours in a 172, and that's the plane that I did all my training in and I feel the most comfortable in. However, my wife just preferred something that would be a little bit faster, again, that could carry a little bit more weight and a little bit bigger, which landed me on the Cessna 182. So after searching 500 to 1,000 different planes, I filtered everything down to the 182, put in what I thought my budget would be for the purchase price of the plane, and then I started creating an Excel spreadsheet. And as you can probably guess, on this spreadsheet, I entered everything, every detail that I could about the plane, as far as the cost, where it's located, how many hours are on the total time of the airframe, how many hours are on the engine since the major overhaul, does it have electric flaps or the Johnson bar, what year model it is, avionics upgrades or lack thereof, etc. I then narrowed it down to basically my top 6 or 7 planes and started sending messages to the sellers or the brokers who represent those sellers. Immediately that narrowed it down to just a handful, maybe 3 or 4, because some people just didn't reply. So I landed on one plane that I thought would be the best fit for me. And again, this is all things considered with the purchase cost, the maintenance cost, upkeep costs, hours on the plane, and so on. So now that I've found a plane, basically it becomes super overwhelming of how do I even buy one? So I basically just called the broker and he said it's kind of like buying a house. Well, here's the thing. I've never bought a house before. So he sort of explained the process that basically you can look at the listing, see what you think, and submit an offer to the seller. The seller will then accept or counter your offer, and once you do that and he accepts, you put a deposit into an escrow account. Of course, the broker has an escrow agent that he likes using in Oklahoma City, which is where the FAA is at, which makes sense why the escrow agent is there. So I put a deposit into escrow and I scheduled a pre-purchase or a pre-buy inspection. An added layer of stress here is that the plane is located about 9 hours driving away from me. So it's not like I can just pop by and take a look at it at a local airport. I live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the plane is in the middle of Florida. So the reason why that adds stress is because I'm kind of dealing with something that is out of my control or out of reach from me on a day-to-day basis. So basically I started calling around local airports and local mechanics in Florida near the plane to schedule a pre-purchase inspection. So that brings me to this point and why I'm here. I have a pre-purchase inspection with a local mechanic scheduled for tomorrow. So I drove down this afternoon. I will meet the mechanic tomorrow to go over the logs, any damage history, and he will perform the inspection. This will also be the first time that I see the plane for the first time. Now you might be thinking it's a little sketchy to have a large sum of a deposit money in escrow. However, per the contract that I signed with the broker, it's fully refundable if the pre-purchase inspection does not go well. So tomorrow we'll do the inspection, we'll get the report from the pre-purchase inspection, and then we'll go from there. As it stands right now, I have a closing date of next Friday, which is 1 week from today. However, I already have full finance loan approval. I have my insurance set up to be in effect next Friday. Everything's kind of on go, provided that this inspection goes well. For me personally, there's a little bit more stress, and that is that this plane has more than 200 horsepower, and so you're required to have a high performance endorsement in your logbook in the United States as a private pilot to fly something that has more than 200 horsepower. I don't have that endorsement right now. I need to get it before I can even fly the plane back home. Also, with the insurance that I have for this plane, it is an insurance requirement that I have a minimum of 5 hours dual instruction in the make and model. It does not have to be my plane, it just has to be another Cessna 182, and I have to have 10 hours of total time. Right now, I have 0 hours in a 182. So you see how this can be a little stressful. Ideally, I would close on the plane next Friday and then fly it back Friday afternoon back home. However, I'm having a hard time finding an instructor and a 182 available for rent in my area to where I can get those hours so that I'm legal to fly, as well as the high performance endorsement. The stress has kind of went away a little bit though, because quite frankly, it's not a big deal, it's not a rush. I can always just close on the plane next Friday, let it sit for 2 weeks down here, tied down at the current airport until I'm able to come down on my schedule and fly the plane home. Just because the closing happens next Friday does not mean that I have to fly it home next Friday. The closing happens electronically through escrow. So I do have some backup plans. I've talked to some local instructors here that could always just fly the plane home with me. I have a local instructor at home that can get me the hours in the plane, whether that means I bring him to Florida with me and then he flies it home with me. Whatever I need to do, eventually we will get there. It's just highly stressful for me right now. But of course, this is all first world problems and I'm not complaining. I'm just letting you know where I'm at. So while it is stressful, and stress in general is a thing of perspective as well. This is stressful for me personally, but it is a very good stress. And as long as I can get through this stress, it will turn into excitement in the very near future. So for now, I'm going to enjoy this nice hotel room, get something to eat, get a good night's sleep, and go check out the plane in the morning.
Okay, so I met with the mechanic, looked at the plane with the mechanic. He did a full pre-buy inspection, basically a 100-hour inspection on the plane. There were a couple issues noted. Number one, he noted a potential fuel leak at the front of the engine on a bolt stud. He also noted that there was some soot or like some metal shaving dust on the front side of the firewall right near the alternator. And then the last thing was when he was doing the compression test, cylinder number 5 was getting compression test results that were in the 30s. So I left, I'm back home now. The owners, I got the pre-buy inspection report over to the current owner. He got his mechanic to address all issues. So number one, the potential fuel leak was not an actual fuel leak. It was that they did not clean up residue that was on there from a previous repair. So it wasn't an actual fuel leak, it was just some residue that had not dried around that stud. The cylinder compression test was tested again with new calibrated tools, which I've realized does make a difference. And it was also done when my pre-buy inspection mechanic did the test. He did it with the engine cold, whereas the test was reran with newly calibrated or freshly calibrated tools, as well as after a 2-hour flight. And then the compression results on that cylinder were up in the 60s. Lastly, the alternator was completely rebuilt. There was a loose mounting bolt that was vibrating, causing those metal shavings, and he also replaced and rebuilt the alternator with new brushes to ensure that the brushes weren't going bad, causing those metal shavings. So all that stuff's done, and the most exciting part is that I have now closed on the airplane, and I am now an airplane owner. I will be leaving tomorrow to catch a commercial flight down to Tampa, Florida, get a ride over to my plane, and flying it back tomorrow. I will make that the next video on this channel, so be sure to stay tuned and catch that video. Thanks for watching. That's an update. I'll see you next time.